A restless generation, we're turning over every stone, hoping to find salvation in a world that's left us cold. Can we get back to the altar, back to the arms of our first love? There's only one way to the Father, and He's calling out to us. To the captive, it looks like freedom. To the orphan, it feels like home. To the skeptic, it might sound crazy to believe in a God who loves. In a world where our hearts are breaking and we're lost in the mess we've made, like a blinding light in the dead of night, it's the gospel that makes a way. It might sound crazy to believe in a God who loves. In a world where our hearts are breaking.
We have been called to follow Christ. We are to preach, we are to teach, we are to fight. So where you lead me, I will go. Touch my lips, by your strength I will go. I will go where you lead me, I will go. Where you lead me, who will go for us? I will go. I will go where you lead me, I will go. Where you lead me, here am I. Send me, Lord, I will go. Because my eyes have seen the King, I must tell all the world to worship Him. In all the nations, in all the world, where He sends me, yes, I will go. I will go where you lead me, I will go. Where you lead me, who will go for us? I will go. I will go where you lead me, I will go. Where you lead me, here am I. Send me, Lord, I will go. I will go, I will go. Who will go for us? I will go. I will go, I will go. Here am I. Send me, Lord, I will go. I will go, I will go, I will go.
Good morning and a happy Sabbath to all. Welcome to our AY session. Today's topic is sexual abuse, what's hidden in the dark. So we hope this AY session is an informative one. We hope that you learn something and that you can take it back, spread it with whoever you know, and you can help someone. Yeah, so let us go ahead and bow our heads for a word of prayer. Dear Father, thank you for bringing us here to another Sabbath, to another AY session. Thank you for letting us successfully complete 6 or 7 of these AY sessions in this relationship and sexuality series. May you please help us to bless someone. May you please help someone to learn something from them. May you please help us to share the information so we can help someone, so we can change a life. Please help us to enjoy this session. May it be informative, and may we have a good sitting at your feet in your name. Amen. We will now say the AY pledge. Loving the Lord Jesus, I promise to take an active part in the youth ministry of the church, doing what I can to help others and to finish the work of the gospel in all the world. The aim, the Advent message to all the world in my generation, and the motto, the love of Christ compels me. Now we will have our inspiration.
Amazing Grace. And 29. All hail the power of Jesus' name.
Mighty rock in the weary land, shelter in the time of storm. Be thou our helper ever near, a shelter in the time of storm. Mighty rock in a weary land, cooling shade on the burning sand. Faithful God for the pilgrim band, a shelter in the time of storm.
We will now have a devotion by Sister Nicole.
Good evening, everyone. This afternoon's devotion is written by Louise Medill and is entitled Sexual Abuse, the Healing Journey. It's important to note that because we are whole individuals, sexual abuse wounds the whole person, body, soul, and spirit. The physical scars typically disappear fast, though they too are significant. The emotional aspect. Emotionally, the hurt never goes away. However, through the healing journey, what changes is the control the pain has over the survivor's life. Just as a mother can never forget the pain of a child's death because the loss is irreplaceable, the wound of the loss can be healed to the extent that they're no longer paralyzing. So too, survivors of sexual abuse have many losses to grieve, such as loss of innocence and the loss of a protection from someone they trusted. The pain of the memory for most survivors is initially like the destruction of a bomb blast, but the pain can take a back seat in the overall perspectives of functioning in life. The spiritual aspect. Spiritually, I have never met a survivor of sexual abuse who did not struggle in their relationship with God. The part of them that relates to Him has been damaged. A central, haunting question is, where was God? Why didn't He stop it? The long, hard journey through counseling addresses mainly the emotional, spiritual areas that need healing. It is a journey, not some pat answers in the form of spiritual platitudes. Unfortunately, what some well-intended family and friends advise may be along the lines of forgive and forget. However, forgetting is a human impossibility. The hardware of the memory is always there. In fact, survivors try to forget often for years until the memory of pain explodes. Denial, as it is called clinically, is not a spiritual virtue. What it is a lie. Healing requires conscious remembering on emotional and spiritual levels in order to process through the acceptance. Surviving the damage. What did Nehemiah do when he arrived in Jerusalem? Rolled up his sleeves and go to work? No. Before attempting to rebuild the stage, he took seriously the task of surveying the details, the extent of the damages of the wall. The survivor must do this as well. Make a conscious awareness to extend the damage of their lives. The tendency is to not find out a shortcut, an easy way, But the reality is that the damage needs to be detailed and the rubble cleared away before the building real life can occur. Forgiveness is part of the healing stage, and if premature, it can sabotage healing. Remembering opening the doors to future possibilities of forgiveness. For most victims, a major hurdle is overcoming a placing guilt where it belongs, which is not on your own shoulders. When the milestone is passed, the Holy Spirit can work in their heart regarding the possibility of forgiveness. What forgiveness is and is not. There's often a misunderstanding about forgiveness there's often a misunderstanding about what forgiveness is and what it is not. Basically, the Bible speaks about God's forgiveness and is not something soft and warm. Anger is legitimate. It is right to be angry at sin and wrongdoing. God is angry at sin. How he did become willing to let go of his anger towards us for our sin is to forgive us. The atonement, when God paid for our sin, he paid God. God received the payment. We received the benefits of no longer owing anything. So the basis of forgiveness appears to be a payment. One way to look at it is God was abused by sin. He was hurt and separated from those he loved, which led to anger, which leads to the need for the punishment as payment, which leads to the punishment of crisis, which leads to the punishment Christ took on. For victims of sexual abuse, who is going to pay? The concept of appropriated forgiveness is an answer to the survivor's need for vindication, their need to punish someone. In this, they can feel empathized with and heard. They can identify with God, who has been wounded and got angry, who made somebody pay, and the payment is enough for all time. He was vengeful for them on their behalf. Their attempt at punishment can never be enough. The good news is that God agrees with them. Somebody should pay. Somebody did. The survivor's part is to release their claim to punishment. Different stages. The healing journey for survivor entails intense work at the stage of identifying what is wrong, what wrongs were done to them, owing to their sadness and anger, grieving their loss, and clearing the way for damaged thoughts and behaviors that held them back. This work then eventually provides the way for them to appreciate the knowledge that God keeps the score on their behalf. He made somebody pay, and that's enough. They can then let go of their tight grip on the need for vindication. It's been accomplished for them, and it's more adequate than whatever means they might attempt. So, for people who have been abused, in this case, sexually abused, the journey is one of remembering, grief, and anger. Only then can the choice of forgiveness based on Christ's payment on their behalf lead to the wonderful, hope-filled process of rebuilding a life. As they begin to integrate their past with their present and live beyond the confines of sorrow, they open the doors to a future filled with new possibilities and a trust in God who is entirely trustworthy. Thank you this afternoon.
Thank you, Sister Nicole. And we're now going to have an item of special music by Sister Kendria Harris.
We pray
We pray for healing, for prosperity. We pray for your mighty hand to ease our suffering. And all the while you hear his spoken need. Yet love is way too much to give us lesser things. 'Cause what if your blessings come through raindrops? What if your healing comes through tears? What if 1,000 sleepless nights are what it takes to know you're near? What if trials of this life are your mercies in disguise? We pray for wisdom, your voice to hear. We cry in anger when we cannot feel you near. We doubt your goodness, we doubt your love, as if every promise from your word is not enough. And all the while you hear each desperate plea, and long that we'd have faith to believe. 'Cause what if your blessings come through raindrops? What if your healing comes through tears? What if 1,000 sleepless nights are what it takes to know you're near? What if trials of this life are your mercies in disguise? When friends betray us, when darkness seems to win, we know the pain reminds this heart that this is not our home. It's not our home. 'Cause what if your blessings come through raindrops? What if your healing comes through tears? What if 1,000 sleepless nights are what it takes to know you're near? What if the greatest disappointments are the aching of this life? It's the revealing of a greater thirst this world can't satisfy. What if trials of this life, the rain, the storms, the hardest nights, are your mercies in disguise?
Thank you, Sister Harris, for that item of special music. So we've come to the end of our series on relationship and sexuality. And I do think, and I guess you guys can concur with me or dissent, that it was a pretty informative series that we would have had for the quarter. And as we were planning for this particular topic, the series rather, we had the usual suspects. We had marriage, we had singleness, we had friends with benefits. Sister Wendy, you're welcome. We also spoke about homosexuality and masturbation, porn, etc. And the plan initially was to finish the series with a mock wedding where we would have gone into the church and have a little reception, et cetera, et cetera. However, COVID happened. So in revisiting the series, we all decided, which was quite amazing in my opinion, to finish the series with the topic of sexual abuse. And I do believe, and based on the programs we would have had over the years, most of our topics were geared around relationships or situations where consent was a major element. We've never really spoken about relationships, situations where consent was not even a thought process, especially now in COVID time and persons are being home. We've heard the statistics that sexual abuse is on the rise, and we all know that it's nothing new, unfortunately, and unfortunately it will continue. But we have a mandate as a church, as the people of God, to speak about these things, to expose these things, and hopefully, by the grace of God, lead persons to healing. So this afternoon, like you would have read in the title in our little flyer, the topic is sexual abuse, what is hidden in the dark. To further set the tone for this afternoon, we're going to have a testimony.
So how old were you when the abuse started with your dad?
Well, I was just very, very young when he started to put his hands on me and do different things. And but when I was a young teenager, it went beyond just putting his hands on me to just making me his mistress. Mm-hmm. And my mom caught him when I was a teenager. She came home unexpectedly and caught him, and just turned around, walked out of the house. You know, I thought, oh, finally I'm gonna get some help. She turned around and walked out of the house and came back 2 hours later and just never said a thing, not to him or to me. Mm. I don't know what she decided in those 2 hours, but actually it was harder for me to get over that than it was what my dad did, because I still don't grasp how a mother can do that. But,
especially because you're a mother.
Yeah.
And your kids.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But my mother she had a terrible life. I mean, she ended up, I think from the guilt, she had a nervous breakdown. She took shock treatments for 2 years because that's what they did back then. And she never was really right after that. Mm. But she had almost like a crazy addiction to my dad. It was like she hated him, but she couldn't stay away from him.
Codependency.
It was just really strange.
Yeah. What did you do with all that pain, all that disappointment, all that betrayal? Because it feels like it was just one blow after another throughout your childhood.
Well, gratefully, I was born again when I was 9. Mm. And not because I lived in a godly family, but I always had an awareness of God. I had a grandfather that was a great Christian, and he sat and prayed all the time. And I don't know this, but I still think he probably prayed me into the kingdom. Mm-hmm. And so we were visiting relatives, and I snuck off to church with them. My dad was out getting drunk. Saturday night, he always got drunk. Every Saturday night, he got drunk. Mm. And I went with the purpose in mind of getting saved. Mm. And I always kind of laugh, but there were 3 of my cousins, I took them, we all went, and when I got ready to go to the altar, I said, come on, we're all gonna get saved.
Good for you. I love that. Even back then, you were leading people.
Then, I was like,
let's go.
And I remember having a real experience of cleansing, and I knew God had touched me, but the next day I cheated in a game of hide and go seek. I was tempted to peek, and I did. And the devil, which I didn't know it was the devil then, told me I'd lost my salvation. And so from then until I was a young adult, I look back now and I realize God was with me, and that was what gave me the determination to overcome the situation that I was in. But I thought overcoming it was just getting out of the house, getting away from it, being able to support myself. But as I said on an earlier show, I didn't realize that I took the problem with me, but it was in my soul.
Exactly.
So I looked okay on the outside. I didn't look damaged, you know. I held down a good job, but man, I was a mess inside.
Yeah.
And a lot of it really just boiled down to guilt and shame and just not liking myself. And if you don't like yourself, nothing else is going to work. If you don't get along with you, how can you get along with anybody else?
Yeah.
And I married the first guy that came along when I was 18 just because I really thought nobody would ever want me. And that was another 5-year nightmare because he ran around with other women all the time and was really a petty thief and ended up going to prison. And I had one child, and I had gotten to the point where I was just desperate. So I had to go back home. Of course, I knew that was going to be just trying to avoid my dad all the time. And so I was washing my mother's car one day out in front of the house, and Dave Meyer pulled up to pick up the guy that lived in their 2-family flat, and he'd been praying for a wife, and he was 26, and he was ready to get married, and he asked God to make it somebody that needed help.
Oh.
And he was dating 3 other women. I said, well, Dave definitely believed the faith without works was dead. So he was busy looking, and so he said, hey, you want to wash my car? And I said, if you want your car washed, buddy, wash it yourself.
He said, she needs help.
No, you know what he said? He went off in his heart, that's the girl for me.
Yeah.
And so we literally had 5 dates and got married.
Wow.
So I said he had to marry me fast before he found out what he was getting, otherwise he would have never done it. But I was such a mess.
And so how many years has that been now? Almost
52.
Oh, can you
That is
believe that?
Alrighty. Yes, this afternoon's discussion will be led by our very own Pastor Salman. He's the director of the Family Life here at the East Caribbean Conference. And he's been championing, in my opinion, and I'm sure in yours, God-centered families for what I would assume decades now. And his commitment to the reparation and sustainability of Christian families is something that I think is very, very commendable. So it's a great pleasure to have him this afternoon discuss with us the malignancy of the issue of sexual abuse and hopefully, and the healing that, and points for healing. And as always with our other topics, if for whatever reason you are uncomfortable of asking a question or commenting, leave the chat, create an alias, and then come back, and then you could just ask your questions under alias if you so choose. So don't be afraid to raise your hands, ask questions, give comments, because I do believe this is a cancer in our church and in our families that need to be rooted out, and it can only be rooted out if it is exposed, if the light is shone upon it, and then we take it by the horns and deal with it. And we're going to deal with it if it's adequately exposed. So without any further ado, I will invite Pastor Salman to lead our discussion.
Good evening to everybody. The beauty about Zoom is that you don't see anybody. You get lucky, you see yourself. And but it is good to be with you this evening, Ms. Kara Louis and the members of the Mile and Quarter Seventh-day Adventist Church, one of my favorite churches in the whole world. Good evening to one and good evening to all. It was interesting listening to the interview with Joyce Myers there. And clearly she is evidence of the fact that people can change and get past the sexual abuse issues. And so I'm very happy for her. And I'm also very happy for any other person who have overcome. Let me say to you that if you are someone who is presently going through any form of abuse, whether it be sexual or otherwise, just know that there's always hope and that you could always reach out at any time and get help, because as secrecy as abuse is, there are people out there who are willing to help, at least guide you through this very, very difficult time. Now, please give me permission to share my screen with you. I have not included any Bible text in my presentation. For those who may be expecting that, is because I wanted to really stay with the pure side of sexual abuse. You will work the rest out. So give me permission to share, please, so that I can begin this presentation. And again, I just want to thank you for the opportunity to share about this topic, sexual abuse, and the dark side of it. You are familiar with this man. I'm sure that some of you would have seen this guy, Dr. Nassar, and he has been on the news a lot during the past 2 weeks or so. And it's because he is responsible for the sexual abuse of these young ladies here, gymnasts. And you would have seen some of them at the Olympics. Those of you who follow the Olympics like I did would have seen these ladies, or at least some of them, one or two. Maybe their faces look different, but you would have seen these ladies, and they look good on the outside. Joyce Meyer spoke about looking good on the outside, but then on the inside is a mess. And this is no doubt the case with these ladies here. Of course, they have lots of money, but one thing you will learn about money, money doesn't solve that internal pain that you have. And so our hearts go out to them, because they were not protected from this guy when they should have been protected from him. They were not. And he did all kinds of things with these young ladies. A matter of fact, if you read some of the information about him, as I have done in preparing for this all week, if you would have read some of the information, this guy sexually abused over 200 ladies, over 200. Excuse me, because he wasn't only working with the gymnastic team. He worked with other teams right across the US, and I imagine other places. Excuse me. So he is over 200 women, and the young girls, and I imagine that he became comfortable with it, believing that he can get away with it. He can get away with it. But of course, he is presently in jail. I imagine part of his imprisonment has to do with these young ladies here and the others that he has abused over the years. But what is this thing we call abuse anyhow? Let's talk about what is abuse. And sexual abuse, or some people call it sexual violence. And by the way, the information that I'm sharing with you, in most cases, you can find it online. I have a few books on domestic violence and sexual abuse and so on. But I find that the one online was a lot more up to date than the ones that I have. This is some of what books I would have used when I was at Loma Linda University. Actually, I went there after leaving the Mile and Quarter Church. That was around, when was that now? So I think Elder Jordan stayed in touch with me during those 2 years I was out studying. And so some of those books though were outdated. So there's some good information that can be found online really. And so most of my information, if not all, is from the CDC and also from the Johns Hopkins University. And so they're given the definition for sexual abuse. They say that sexual activity is sexual activity when consent is not obtained or not freely given. It is a serious public health problem in the United States. I know not only in the United States, but anywhere in the world. We have that problem here in Barbados as well. The issue of sexual abuse. I've had, unfortunately, the opportunity to work with some of those clients over the years right here in Barbados. Of course, I've worked with some in Tennessee, in the US, and California as well, but this is my home, this is where I live. And so it's closer to me here. So this is not only something that happened in the United States, let's bring it a little closer home to realize that it also happens here, okay? So it is a serious public health problem in the US of A, and that has a profound impact on lifelong health, opportunity, and well-being. Sexual violence. We use the word sexual abuse, but it's better to use the word sexual violence. So sexual violence impacts every community and affects people of all genders, sexual orientation, and ages. Anyone can experience or perpetuate sexual violence, and we need to understand that. Anyone can experience it. The perpetrator of sexual violence is usually someone who knows the victim, such as a friend, a former intimate partner, meaning a former husband or wife, or a former boyfriend or girlfriend. It could be a co-worker, it could be a neighbor, a family member. And this is what helps, this is part of the reason why sexual abuse is so secretive, because the people who do it to you are those people who are close by you. So that sexual violence can occur in person, it can occur online. If you have someone online that is constantly harassing you and probably showing private parts, or they are doing, you know, sending sexual messages, whether it be on WhatsApp or whatever, or any form of technology, if they're doing that, that is also considered sexual abuse, such as posting or sharing sexual pictures of someone without their consent, or non-sexual text, or sexting, they're called it. So there are those persons out there who would send messages, they would send information to you that you don't really want to see or hear. That is considered sexual violence. And because we are at a stage in the world where there's so much, where everybody is in some form of social media, the possibility, the strong possibilities are there for sexual violence. Now, what about, and you may ask, what about sexual violence or abuse in marriage? What about that one? How does that occur? I need to say that right up front, that sexual abuse does or do occur in marriages, all right? Anytime that you are not consenting to sex and you're being forced upon, it is sexual violence, sexual abuse. It is through manipulation, right? It is unwanted or non-sensual sex. It's pressuring or demanding you to perform, watch this now, pay attention, pressuring you or demanding you to perform a sexual act that you do not want to do. This is sexual abuse. So the sexual abuse in any form, even by a husband, is considered a crime. And Ms. Kara, she is a lawyer, so I'm sure she can probably give more support to that and speak to that to you at another time, or even after the presentation. Now, there are 5 types of sexual violence. There's rape. There's rape, and we know what rape is. We don't need to dwell on that. Second, being made to penetrate someone else. In other words, if you are encouraged to go and penetrate someone else, or even forced to penetrate or have sex with someone else, that is sexual violence. And there's also sexual coercion, where there are those persons who are forcing you, trying to coerce you into having sex. You don't want to do it. And this can happen very often among young people. You have a young man or a man who may be trying to force you to have sex for whatever reason. and he does whatever he can to so that he can get you, you know, take off your panties, you know. Then there's unwanted sexual contact. There are those people who would, excuse me, there are those persons who will try to engage in sex with you, and you know, they may try to touch you here or touch you there, that kind of thing. And you heard Joyce Myers a second ago speak to that. You know, it was touching first. So sometimes you go there to touch first, okay? Then there's a non-contact on sexual experiences. There are those who would send messages. They may not touch you. They may not do all of that stuff, but they would do other things, you know, send you, send messages to you via WhatsApp. It can be via email, those kind of things. All right, that is considered sexual abuse. And then there's contact sexual violence. This is where there's the actual contact where the act is really occurring, or you're being forced upon. The act is really occurring, and you are unhappy with that. So now, what does the question has to be asked then? What is the effect of sexual abuse on a person? Because it's a criminal act. It's against the law, of course. It damages you and so, but what are the effects? Let's look at some of the effects of sexual abuse or sexual violence. It is a bruising and genital injuries, and oftentimes these are kind of under the clothes kind of thing. These are not behaviors that can be visible to the eye. They're under the clothing, all right? The bruising and the genital injuries. The doctor would probably see this when you go to him. And, you know, your parents would take you, they would have to check and see if there was any scarring of areas in the vagina. Or in the case of young men, for those who have been sexually abused, go and check and see if there's any damage around the anus and so on in the anal area. All right, there's also psychological effects of sexual abuse. There's depression. And I can tell you for a fact, that there are most of those who I would have worked with, most of them overseas, with sexual abuse, one or two here, but overseas, they suffer from deep depression. In other words, the developmental disorders, depression, anxiety, suicidal thoughts, these kind of go together. Then the victims may also suffer from PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. They re-experience a lot of the abuse that took place. All right, they can't sleep at nights. Okay, they can't eat. All right, they don't want to associate with friends, things like that, because there is traumatic. There's a lot of pain, and I'm sure that if Joyce Myers had the time, she can talk a lot about that internal pain that she experienced, which she just mentioned there. She didn't get into detail, at least not on that piece, that short clip that we were able to view. But I am sure that if she were to get into real deeply into the pain, she would really be able to show you the kind of stress that she was under. Then the sexual violence is also linked to negative health behaviors. Persons who have been sexually abused, they're getting a lot of smoking. When I say smoking, I don't mean just smoking cigarettes now. All right. There's a lot of substance abuse, which is smoking, there's alcohol, there's marijuana, all of those things. And not only that, the hurtful thing about it is that the very thing that they did not like, sex, they become very, very sexually active, Now, over the years, there have been an increase in sexual abuse and sexual violence. And let me say here that some of what I may share from you, a lot of this is not really accurate in the sense that there are those who do not report. There are many, many victims of sexual abuse or sexual violence who do not report their violence, do not report it. But what is being given to us are cases where the report has been given. All right. So there's an increase in sexual violence, and like was mentioned earlier by Ms. Cara there, with the shutdowns and that we have had and all that is going on, we have seen an increase. Matter of fact, we have seen an increase in a number of sexual issues, a lot of substance. We've seen an increase in most of these vials. Yeah, we've seen an increase in them. There's mental disorders are linked to child abuse. Then there's well documented publicized cases that have questioned the validity of children's testimony and recovered memories of sexual abuse. So there are those persons who really question whether or not children have really been abused, if what they say happened really happened. I listened to I was listening to Dr. Brastacks about 2 weeks ago. I listen to it fairly often. About 2 weeks ago, and I noticed that there was a man who came on there. Of course, he was very frustrated and so on and so forth, but he came on and he mentioned how it is that his daughter was sexually abused, and what they had to go through as a family. And this was when the child was a little over 2 years. And they questioned that child over and over again. And listen, here's the craziness about this, church. Now this child is about 8 years of age, I think he said 7.5, 8 years of age. They want to go back now and try to question this child as to what the child would have said to them while the child was a little over 2 years. Come on. And so clearly there is a lot of doubt and mistrust about whether or not children are able to remember, because if they think if you were to ask a child 2 years, 2.5 years, 3 years about sexual abuse, there's no guarantee that the information that the child gives is correct. But anybody who knows who have worked with children over the years, and you engage children in play therapy, children are able to reveal to you whether or not they have been abused. But of course, oftentimes we don't want to believe children. And because we don't want to believe them is why we have all of these doubts. But my thing has always been, give the child the benefit of the doubt. Give the child the benefit of the doubt. Now, every 9 minutes it says, Child Protective Services substantiates or finds evidence for or claim of sexual abuse. Every 9 minutes. Now, for those of you who are not familiar with Child Protective Services is an organization in the US of A that specifically, works to protect children. And my time working there in the USA with children and their families, we always had to keep forms with us. As long as you suspect it, you don't have to have evidence. As long as you're a counselor, a psychotherapist, and you discover and you find and you have any suspicion that the child is abused, you have to pull that form out, gather all the information, because you make it clear to the family when you meet them, you're here to help them. But if you discover that there's any form of sexual abuse of children, that you will have to report it. That was always the case at the beginning. You mentioned that every time. And so Child Protective Services do just that. They protect children. So when that form is turned into Child Protective Services, they send their workers out to do, the social workers out to do the research to find out whether or not the child was abused or otherwise. That was not my job. My job was to report it, because children had to be protected. And the reason why we protect our children is that because children are the future of any island, of any country. And so we have to make sure that our children are well protected. So every 9 minutes, and notice what this one says here. This one says that of all the victims under 18, 2 out of 3 are ages 12 to 17 years of age. Now pay attention to that. 2 out of 3 are 12 to 17 years of age. Yeah. Now these are startling results. Now listen, I don't have a lot of results to give, a lot of research to give you about Barbados, but if you look at it kind of per capita, these things occur in Barbados. This is no evidence. This is nothing that we don't know. The same things that happen in the big countries happen in the small countries. The only thing is that I find we do not have, we don't do enough research on Barbados and post them for people to know. It says that 1 in 9 girls, watch this, 1 in 9 girls and 1 in 53 boys under the age of 18 experience sexual abuse or assault by the hands of an adult. 82% of all victims under 18 are female. Females ages 16 to 19 are 4 times more likely than the general population to be a victim of rape, attempted rape, or sexual assault. This is why it is very, very important that when our children have reached a certain age, that as parents, you have to do all you can to protect them. You have to be careful where you send your children. You can't just send your children to anybody anymore. Yeah? You have a right to protect your children. I have a right to protect my children. Now watch, check this bit of information here again. Child victims often know their perpetrator. They generally know it. Among cases of child sexual abuse reported by law, 7% are strangers. This is 93% are known, this is taken from 93% are known to the victim most of the time, right? 93% known to the victim. 7% by strangers, 59% by acquaintances, and 34% by family members. Now pay attention to that, my people. So you don't have to worry about whether or not it's a stranger that's doing this, you know. 93% of the times, the person who is doing this is known by the victim. See? Now they did some research, and what they found is that of 800 American colleges, 19% of women and 9% of men reported being sexually abused. Of 800 American colleges, 19% of women and 9% of men sexually abused. That is the reported, because everybody don't report. That is why I say that these numbers are more than what we say they are. 3,000 persons in one city reporting sexual abuse, 7% of women and 4% of men sexually abused. A sample of 900 women, 12% sexually abused by a relative. Here. These ladies here went to Congress, and you would have seen that on CNN over the last few days. It kind of pained my heart to see these ladies. And if you had watched, especially Miss Biles, she was in tears, not because she's Black that I pay attention to her at all. I pay attention to her because she is she's the one that kind of broke down in tears. This one here to the right here, she was very forceful. She didn't cry, she didn't shed any tears, you know. But the reality is here that these four ladies endured sexual abuse by someone who they knew, a coach, someone who was there kind of to protect them, but took advantage of them. Yeah, someone who they trusted, right? And these are the kind of people here that would do these kind of things to you. Family members, clergy, have mercy, coach, babysitters, yeah. Perpetrators of abuse often go to the length to hide their actions and to normalize the abuse in the minds of the victims. In other words, one of the things that perpetrators would do, the abusers would do, is that the abusers will try to tell you, you know, this is normal, you know, it happens to all children, you know, you don't have to worry. You don't have to worry to tell your mommy or your daddy, they know that I'm going to do this to you, you know. This will help you to grow up, you know, make you strong, make you into an adult, you know. They make it seem as though it is all right. They make it seem as though it's all right. And matter of fact, I was kind of taken back for a minute there, and some, you know, some information that I knew came to mind, because the reality is that in the case of Joyce Meyer, her mother went in and saw her father abusing her, saw the father on top of her abusing her, And the mother walked out and came back 2 hours later on and said nothing. Now, the mother clearly was traumatized. But there was something about the mother that told her she couldn't mess with this. She had to leave that alone. You know, is a vicious cycle. It's a very, very vicious cycle. So here, there are physical, behavioral, and emotional problems as a result. Physical signs of abuse are what you might imagine. There's a bruising around the genitals, like I said. There's bleeding, and also there's STIs, sexually transmitted infections. These are all also part of it. As long as you see a child or an adult experiencing these kind of things, you know, chances are that was it. Now, the abusers are very, very clever. Let me say, though, that the cleverness of the abusers, I mean, the abuser's ability to manipulate is beyond imagination. These folk are masters of the art. They are masters of the art. And generally, in a lot of cases, batterers, domestic violence cases, even in those homes where a man may be beating a woman, whatever, that is also possible that inside of that house, there's also sexual abuse, not only to the mother who's being physically abused, but also to the children, that may be in that house. Yeah. Now the abuser really would generally have conversations that or would generally form friendships with the victims, with the child, that is not appropriate for the age. You understand? The relationship that exists between the two of them is generally a little too close in mesh, and the child, of course, oftentimes don't understand that. To be honest with you, I would love to interview those ladies, those gymnasts, to really get a sense of what they went through and what they're going through. But an adult who confides in a child and asks the child to keep secrets from their parents or their caregivers, that is what they, in other words, you don't have to tell your mommy about this. You don't have to tell your daddy about this. You understand? They would understand, or I already told them about it, so you don't have to tell them about it anyhow. Yeah. And then the adult who crosses clear physical and social boundaries for a child, such as touching the child inappropriately in public, or trying to communicate with a child in ways that are intrusive or secretive. Now, an adult who engages in grooming behavior with the child, such as talking about sexually explicit topics, showing the child pornography. And by the way, this is how some persons get addicted to pornography. It starts from very early through child abuse. There's pushing the boundaries of physical contact, or otherwise attempt to normalize inappropriate or sexual behavior. In other words, they're treating the relationship with the child as though this child is an adult. That's how they're doing it, as though the child is an adult. And by treating the child like that, the child begins to accept that kind of behavior as normal. Accept the behavior as normal. All right? Okay. Now, signs of sexual abuse in teens. Now, let me go quickly with this. There's rapid loss or weight gain, possibly accompanied by disordered eating habits. There's unexplained bruises or other evidence of physical violence, and there's contracting of sexual transmitted diseases. There's emotional disorders, like I mentioned, things like depression and those things, anxiety, suicide. Is a sudden decline in grades at school. You know, they withdraw from things, from sports and games that were important to them. They no longer have an interest in them. All right. Significant changes in personal hygiene. There's excessive drinking or drug use There's confiding in a friend about discomfort over being pressured into sexual conduct, withdrawal from close friends, and isolation, possibly in tangent with the emergence of romantic sexual relationships. Now, what is the solution to all of this? Because the solution to all of these things are important. We understand that child abuse is out there. We understand that there's all this sexual violence out there occurring and so on and so forth. Now, I did some research from the CDC and I discovered an interesting thing. Now, keep in mind that there are psychotherapists, psychologists, social workers that specialize in child abuse. All right, not only in child abuse, but they specialize in abuse. Period. Any form of sexual abuse, and even in a lot of ways, some of those people also specialize in domestic violence. Yeah. Now, the CDC has some interventions that work, I imagine, and they go with the acronym called STOP. Now, the STOP acronym is an acronym that we use generally with children in some ways, but also one that we use with persons who have anger problems. But the CDC has a really nice book on this matter of stop sexual violence or stop sexual abuse. The acronym STOP, S-T-O-P, STOP. The S stands for social norms. It says promote social norms that protect against violence. And if you will notice, look, generally we don't have a lot of promotion on sexual violence and so on, domestic violence and those things the Seventh Adventist Church will probably do once a year under the time of the year when it comes in August, on the end it now, August, September time. But we have to promote social norms that protect against violence, protect our children. And whatever we do, okay, must be done in such a way that that gives credibility to whatever approaches we may have. All right. In other words, so whatever we do must support our children. And what we need to do, the strategy is social norm, the approaches, mobilizing men and boys as allies by standard approaches, try to get people involved, try to get persons involved and helping to promote the social norms. Then the T stands for teach. T stands for teach. Teach skills to prevent sexual violence. Teach skills to protect sexual violence. So there's social, social emotional learning, teaching healthy, safe dating and intimate relationship skills to adolescents, because there are a lot of our young people who go out on dates with their young fellas and so on and so forth, and they get a little tap here, they get called names and so on and so forth, and they think it's funny, all right? And so we have to teach them that that is not funny. When a young man slaps you, or even a young woman for that matter slaps you, and say, "I'm sorry, I was just kidding." You got to teach our teens that these things are not okay. All right, you have to teach them that everything is wrong when you go on a date and someone is being violent with you. All right, we're not going to teach them karate or ask them to walk with a gun or anything like that. But what we want to do is to help them to understand that even before they go on a date, they need to be clear as to who they're going with. Let your parents know who the person is. And listen, I always believe that sometimes it's good to carry along someone with you, who can sit across from you and, observe, see what is happening, because a keen observer can pick up things that you miss. But I do understand that nobody wants to take along a third party when they're going on a date. I got that. But I think when you're in that teenage years, especially, to avoid yourself a lot of emotional and psychological scars in the future, it's best to carry along someone with you. But that is only my thing. Who's listening to me anyway? And then we have to empower, empowerment-based training. I think in a lot of ways we have to train our young people, our teens, and people in general, what sexual violence is all about, what good dating is all about, what a good relationship looks like. Yeah, I think all of these are things that need to be taught to our young people. A lot of these teenagers that are dating nowadays, especially where we have the social media and they're going out on dates, and oftentimes some of you are just meeting some guys online for the first time and going out with them. Lots of young ladies have gotten into trouble with that. All right, we need to teach our young ladies and our young men what sex is all about. All right, how to refrain, when to refrain. You know, what happens if you get involved too early with sex and these kind of things. These are things people don't want to talk about anymore. And our young people are finding them online, which is not the best place to find them. So the T and STOP stands for T. And then the O is opportunities, provide opportunities to empower and support girls and women. And let me add boys. So it says there, the approach is to strengthen economic support for women and families, strengthening leadership and opportunities for girls. And then the P stands for protective environments, improving safety and monitoring in schools. I don't know what happens in school, but a lot of this is out of the US of A. And I imagine that, you know, funny things happen in schools, even here. All right, we have to find ways to protect. We have to establish and consistently applying workplace policies that will protect our, that would protect employees when they go to work. Ms. Carroll would probably be the best person to talk about the law as it relates there. What can be put in place, what is considered sexual harassment, even in a workplace. Yeah. And a matter of fact, if you have been listening, and I'm sure that you have been listening, or you would have heard somewhere along the line, there are many men who are now falling as a result of the sexual violence done against young ladies many years ago, because there is no statute of limitation on these things. All right, I don't know what the law is here as of yet, but I somehow believe it's the same here. If you have abused a child, that chances are there is no statute of limitation on that either. All right, so we have to protect our children, we have to protect our young ladies, and now we young men with homosexuality becoming so rampant, by the way. And the homosexual community is of the opinion that they have a right to get to the young boys. They have a right to be able to fondle young boys as much as they want to. And nobody has a right to stop them from having a good time with these young boys. That is their argument, but they forget that their laws, if you force yourself on anybody, it's against the law, right? So we have to protect our children and let our children know the risks involved when they get caught up with certain characters in society. And then the last one to the bottom is SVs, that is support victims. It's important that we give support to victims. There must be services there. There must be somewhere where victims can go, not only children, but adults who have been sexually abused. There should be services available for them. I know that there are certain places here in Barbados, those places are not publicized for good reason, so that in the event that a victim has to go there, they'll be safe from their perpetrator. But there are services, not enough, of course. And I think somehow as counselors, we need to know where these places are. I know where one or two of them are, because I would have had to have some kind of dealing with them in the past. But it's important that we have these services. Someone maybe want to know why the Seventh-day Adventist Church don't have them. Well, it's because we can't afford them. And then support victims, the treatment for victims. Victims need to be given counseling, psychotherapy, so that they can get over their trauma, so that they can get over the abuse. Let me say, one of the things I have observed over the years, there have been some ladies who would have come by me for counseling. They cannot say specifically what went wrong. All they know is this: something happened to them while they were small. And now they are big in their 20s. They're trying to figure out what it is. There's a good reason for that. When trauma becomes too difficult or too painful, what happens is that the child, the victim, will take that trauma and push that trauma very far back into the brain. It's called associative compartmentalization. The child would take that thing and push it so far into the brain that it can forget about it. But as it grows, the child always know that something is there. You can't forget things that have damaged your brain like that. So they try to push them very far back into their brain so as to not to deal with them. But what happens as a result of compartmentalizing that problem is that they develop other psychological problems. And as they get older, they know something is wrong. They can't say what is wrong, but they know something is wrong. And what they do is that they seek therapy to find out what was wrong. What happened to me when I was a child? Why is it that something is bothering me and I do not know what it is? Let me also say this, that some of those victims as well, in cases of women, a young lady can become a lesbian as a result of being sexually abused. A young man can become a homosexual. So in most cases, with the exception of a few, most persons who were abused become gay, get into gay relationships. Not all. Some of them would have had other stuff, but that is for the most cases. And most times you hear persons who are gay, they'll tell you, when you ask them to press hard enough, they'll tell you that they were sexually abused. And because this also creates that problem for them. So the treatment must be made available for these persons. And there is treatment, like I said earlier, there are persons who specialize in this kind of psychotherapy, okay? And then treatment for at-risk children and families to prevent the problem behavior involving sex offenders. And let me say that there are different approaches to treating at-risk children and their families. Most persons, the best way to deal with it is not generally one-on-one individual, but oftentimes the best way to treat is family therapy, where your entire family comes in and seek help. Now, the perpetrators can also get help if they want, but do you know of perpetrators who want you to know that they're perpetrators? So oftentimes, those perpetrators get away, especially in Barbados. I'll tell you this, perpetrators very often get away with what they've done. You know why? Because a lot of family members will begin the process of going to court, as we would say, locking he up. But what happens is that after a while, they give up on that. Not only that, adults as well, you know, when they realize what they have to go through, because as far as I'm concerned, the system doesn't make it easy for them. They're already traumatized, they're already hurting, and what the system does is that the system makes it worse for them. That is how it appears to me. And so you can have oftentimes a lot of persons, of children, adults who are being abused, and as a result of that, they tell no one. They keep it to themselves. And I've met some of them over the years because they don't want anybody to know, not only because they feel shame about it, but it's because they are not convinced that they will be believed and that they will be supported. So what was I trying to tell you all evening for the last few minutes? What was I trying to say? I was really trying to say to you simply this, that abuse is a menace in society, that abuse causes traumatic experiences for the victim, and this can run right into adulthood. I am telling you that as a result of abuse, children have to seek help to overcome it, but many of them don't. Many parents do not support their children. They know that their children are being abused and they don't do anything about it for fear that the money, the economics, I am not going to, if I tell anybody this man going to get locked up and I'm not going to be able to pay my bills. These are some of the realities that we have to face. Economics come first and the child comes second, but you raise a child that becomes a menace to society. And by the way, having to deal with having to treat one of these children in US economy is roughly about $125,000. I don't know what it will cost to treat a child here, but I imagine you can cut that in half because the government is going to have to spend a lot of money and time paying counselors, going to court and all the rest of it. And it takes a lot of money. So I'm trying to tell you that we have to make sure we do all we can to support our children. We do all we can to make sure that our children are well protected. One of the things my wife and I never got in the habit of doing is leaving our children with anybody. Just one couple we know that we would have left our children with. But outside of that, we always kept our children, always kept them, because I understood what can happen to little children. And so we have a responsibility to protect our children, to make sure our children are okay, to keep them safe. We have a responsibility to do just that. So here, I'm trying to say to you is that this is a massive problem, one that is not often addressed in our society. And as you would notice, we don't talk a lot about it, but one that we need to address because our children need to be protected. It was interesting. Some years ago, I met a lady and she works in the office there with the government that deals with these cases. And I was talking to her. I was in the supermarket. I was introduced to her. We were chit-chatting, and she said to me, notice, pay attention. She said to me that she has a big pile of folders on her desk that she has to get to, and she won't get to them in years because there's so many and more keep coming in. Now I want for you to pay attention to that. Let's take it down to the nitty-gritty here. She said to me, she has all of these folders on her desk with cases that have to be investigated. And she said she's not going to get to all of them because there's so many and more keep coming in. Now, I want for you to really take notice of that, because you have to ask yourself the question, who is looking up for these children? Some of these children will grow up big and nothing became of the case. Something is wrong with that. My solution to that, you need to hire more people, more staff to help, or you're going to have to do what the Americans do. The Americans in the American system, what they do is that they take these names and they give them to private institutions, private counseling agencies, who will make sure that those children are given the rightful help that they need. That is what they do. You see, because these things cost money, a lot of money. And so each one of those children on a monthly basis will probably cost the government here in Barbados on a monthly basis, each one child, probably about $2,000, $3,000. And Elder Jordan, you would have to understand that in a difficult economic time, the government right now is not going to pay a lot of attention to that. We want to get the virus gone. But we have to ask ourselves the question, by the time the virus is gone, what else is gone? So I'm saying there needs to be a system put in place to help these children, because most of these families go to the government because the government is free. They don't come to a private person because they have to pay the money up front. But if there's a system where you can go to a private institution and the private institution treats the client and sends the money in to the government, and the government pay them the money, by the way. I mean, you got to pay the money. Then you will discover that we can do better for our children and get help for them. And this is not only true of children, it is also true for those persons who are adults and are unable to pay for their own psychological help. So here, ladies and gentlemen, that is it for me. We have a right to protect our children. The Bible says that children are a heritage of the Lord. Children belong to God, and we have the right to protect them as much as we can. And for the vulnerable population in society, our elders, like to talk about elder abuse. Our elders are also, we have a lot of elderly people who are sexually abused. So I'm saying we can talk a lot about these kind of things, but I'm saying to you, we have to do all we can to help the best we can. May God bless you.
Thank you, Pastor Salmon, for that wonderful and informative exposition on sexual abuse. So at this point, we're going to open the floor for comments and or questions. And I would get the ball rolling to get the thing get a bit heated. Pastor, you would have spoken about persons, parents, and they can say mother. No, I'm not do that because it can be either or. Parents know that their children are being abused. Unfortunately, we all know somebody who has been abused. And more times, we knew them when we were children. I will share an experience. I was in secondary school. And I remember the lady I'm going to speak about, she was a year younger than I was. And I think she was 12, if I remember correctly. And my cousin and her, they were friends. They were really close friends. And the discussion came out, because, we are from St. Lucie, so we use the word live with. We know the old time how you don't word live with. And she said, my friend's stepfather is living with her. And of course I knew what that meant, but I was 13. And it was as though there was this big secret. And the mother knows, but she did nothing. And at 13, I knew there's something wrong here, but it was almost as though I didn't know what to do. Because should I go and tell my mother or my father that this thing is happening? But then a thought was, this is not my issue. This is not my secret. And even though I was 13, I believe that mindset is pervasive in our society because we see children getting abused. The first time I ever read an account of a 5-year-old girl that was abused by her father, it got me so angry that I was looking for a knife to sharpen. I just being honest. I was like, who can I chop up today? Because it was so detailed. And this baby was going through, and she kept saying, Daddy did this, Daddy did that. And the mere fact that she was still calling him Daddy, but then still have to say, Daddy, push his penis clear, Daddy, touch this. And then people sitting down watching as though, is she enough to give testimony? And like you would have said, and I think you were speaking about the role playing. Children don't lie when it comes to these situations. They may not know what to call it, but they know Daddy, Uncle John, or somebody close did this thing to me. I'm not familiar with it, but it was something that was done to me. And I think apart from the government stepping in, because I believe to Pastor, the government, let me just think. The government needs to take bigger initiative on protecting our children because there's so many children out there and albeit adults out there who are suffering under the burden of being sexually abused. But mommy didn't believe me. The policeman laughed if it was a boy saying that woman inferior. Oh, policeman, you skipper, but she want you. No, sir. He was being abused. We as the church and as the adults, when we see you didn't really speak on it, but when someone is being abused, I can divert here a bit. We all know that one girl or those couple of girls who are promiscuous from a young age. And you would say, oh, well, she's a low rat, or she is a W, what she saw. And nobody takes the time to think, was Susie abused? What is going on in Susie's home? You're just seeing Susie going from man to man to man at a young age, but nobody is saying, there's a reason why Susie's behaving that way. And I think as adults, we must be more keen to see when these children are being abused. And instead of saying, oh, that ain't my business, step on it, because like you would have said, if the parents aren't doing it, the church isn't doing it, the government don't have the budget to do it, then who is going to do it? These kids are going to be left in the balance, and we see the effects of it now, because you would have rightly said there are many persons who are walking around depressed, suicide. Ain't sure if the man, woman, or he, they, she, it, they're not too sure where they are, because there are things in their past that have not been resolved, especially with the issue of sexual abuse. So I do believe I am overstepping my boundaries, but I am passionate enough to say straight. If I see a little girl and she comes to me and says, Auntie Cara, you know, Daddy touched me there, pastor and church, and letting you guys know now, I am not above taking that child to the police. Of course, if any the mother and father was speaking or whatever, but I am going to the bottle for this child, because I know if she has to come and tell me, it means that she may have told her father, her mother, and nothing was done. So she's telling me the responsibilities on me as a grown adult, as a Christian, to help this child through this thing, and do not let her or him become a narcissist. That's just a comment that I wanted to add to the discussion. This system is very passionate to me, because it boils my blood how grown men and women can see children. And I always have a little, this is of course not Christian people. If you have an itch, there are people who can deal with that age, if you understand what I mean, before you having to abuse children. But of course, not with Christians, because we don't do that. But you know, if you are non-Christian,
go look for prostitute.
There we go, Pastor. Yeah, there we go. You know, go and well, I don't know how much they cost, so they might pretend. But you can go and find your pleasure somewhere else and leave. I'll leave children alone.
Maybe we need to find out and put it up so that people know.
Please don't, Pastor. Please don't.
Yeah.
So Karen.
Yes, it's Verna.
I've been waiting a long time. I want to pick up where Pastor Selma. Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon, my dear.
Yeah,
How are
you
you?
can't see my face. I can see yours. I want to pick up on where you began. And one of the comments that I'm going to make is that we need to take off our blinkers. Sometimes people get away because of who they are.
That's correct, yeah.
And two, adults need to be more
vigilant.
Not only vigilant, but to listen to their children.
Yep.
And I was reading the incident with that doctor. And at one point in time, one of the girls, the mother was in the room where the child was being examined and the abuse was taking place. When she came up, she told the father, so and so happened. That father took that child back into the doctor and made her apologize for making that remark. When he found out that that child was telling the truth, I believe that they had to hold him back from killing that doctor. We got to take off the blinkers. Too many times things happen because we allow them, because of who the people are. All those priests that were that came out now, where the boys are now adults, because they were priests and everybody felt okay, they're holy, they got away with murder for years. For years. There's certain things that a society seem not to be able to get away from. Child abuse is one of them. It's a sin that perpetuates many generations because people allow it to happen and refuse to believe the children. And as you mentioned, with the case with the mothers, if that man is supporting the home, the child will get a good couple of slaps. You want to take away the money that is supporting me?
That's right.
These are the realities of the situation.
Yeah.
They get, because people allow them to get away.
Yeah, and the society though is geared towards that, like you say, that favoritism thing. And I think that unless we start to address, but we do not, the problem we have oftentimes, though, like I said, we don't address these issues generally, The church though, the church has a program. I didn't dwell too much on the church side of it because I needed to make it broader, but the church has a program that is designed to protect our children, right? Came from GC. That if you suspect that, if you have an elder or anybody who's suspected of any form of abuse or so on, they're not to be around children. that kind of thing. And that, you know, we try to educate the church about that some time ago. I hope the church is still following that, because the reality is that we have had over the years children being abused by those in positions of leadership, and not only just in church, but on the outside of church. But I think though, Sister Kozer, that a lot of this is now coming around. I think that there are, in some ways, people are becoming, especially now with the Me Too movement, there are those who are becoming more, yes, and I think that they need to be much more vocal than they are, even here locally. But we can do the best we can, huh? But we have to convince some mothers at home that they need to choose their child, or their child's well-being over a few dollars. We need to do that, because there are men we still have all right now who are abusing their children, their girl children.
Hi, Pastor.
Questions? If
Hey,
there's
Pastor.
none, that's fine too.
Hey, Pastor, how are you doing?
Is renewing mind saying something?
Yes, I am saying something. As somebody who
Renewing
has,
mind, are you talking? I can't hear you.
you can't hear me?
Say something. We can hear you.
Oh, okay. As somebody who has survived abuse.
Hello?
Hi, you can't hear me? You still can't hear me?
Cara, are you there?
Yes, Pastor. Can you hear me?
She get bumped off.
Oh,
My
something.
brother, any more questions you have for me? If there are none, no, I cannot hear you all. No.
I can't hear. I can hear Pastor, but he can't hear me. So I really know.
I'm hearing you now. I'm hearing too.
Yeah, I can hear him too.
You're hearing. So you go ahead.
And maybe you can type
We
your
can hear
question
you.
as
Someone
well.
is asking a question. Yeah, I am not hearing you though, and I don't have anything here to suggest that my system is as normal as it could be.
Okay. So
All right, type your question so he can see
Yeah, I
it.
think I'll do that. I think I will,
well, he can let him log off then.
rather than all y'all leaving and come back.
I will wait. I will await his return.
Okay.
Can anybody hear me now?
Yes,
Yes.
we can. Can you hear?
Can you hear us?
Oh, it don't
Are you
seem
hearing
so.
me?
Yes.
Yes, we can hear you. Can you hear us?
Let me try changing systems here for a minute. Just hold on. But I'm not hearing you. So let me see if I can try. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Can you hear us?
Yeah, I changed systems there. So let me see if we can.
Can you hear us?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Okay, good, perfect.
I'm not
Right.
sure why. Let me see if I can let you see me too. Can you see me?
Yes,
Yes,
we're
sir.
seeing you.
Am I good looking?
Roger that.
Am I good looking?
No comment over here.
None at all.
Yeah, so
benefited from having a good wife.
So, Pastor, as someone who has survived abuse on more than 3 occasions in my lifetime, It has been a very rough road. At first, I didn't think that those things were abuse until I went counseling. I think it was about 25. And the lady said, actually, that's abuse. And only when she said that is when it like kind of hit home. And then to actually, well, not to disagree, but to agree with you on the point that it's hidden and you can't really unravel it on your own. So you need that assistance, professional assistance, so that you can get into the meat of the matter, not diagnose yourself, but get the help that you need so that you can better approach the situation. However, I didn't stay for the treatment to the end. I started with some of the things that she would have given to me, but then what would have occurred, then it actually brought out some behavioral traits that only now in my as I got older, that I realized that these things are attached to sexual abuse. And my sexual abuse was also occurred from someone in church. And it was not at the Adventist church, but at church. And it always comes back to me in my mind, but I don't know how to explain it. I deal with it. So what would you call an individual then? Because you spoke to another person who would have that stuff hidden in the back of their minds. But what would you call the individual who sees that stuff and deals with it as he or she sees it? Well, I deal with it mainly through prayer and seeking God.
You hold on. You said what would I?
No, how would you diagnose? Because you said earlier that there are some people who it stays in the mind, it stays there, and they don't.
It's called associative compartmentalization.
Yeah. So then, for the individual now who actually sees it, who goes after it on their own in their thoughts, seeks out the thing, and sees all of the rubble, all the mess, but is just seeking through prayer. And God, the only reason I am here today, to be quite honest, is because God has been keeping my mind going through that whole thing. I don't think that I am fully out of the trauma, but I know that God has been keeping me all along the way. What would you say to the individual who is going through, who's actually dealing with it face on without any professional help?
Well, I would really recommend professional help, because it gives you, I think there are certain things you just need to talk out, right? That talking has a way of helping to, unless you do a lot of journaling on your own, yeah? But I do believe that there is so much hurt and pain, so much psychological and emotional damage as a result of having to go through that kind of trauma, that as much as I believe that prayer and so on will help get you through, I still believe that people need people. I still believe that that person that you can sit down in front of and talk, just to make, I think that person can help you to really probably dig a little deeper down inside of there and help do a lot more uncovering. Unless you can say for sure that you are fully healed. If you can say that you're fully healed, well, that's fine. But if you're still having some doubts and there's still things lingering inside there, and there are many years that have passed, it'd be good. But you know, I have a bias, of course. My bias is that I think everybody needs a counselor. And if you look at those young ladies there, the gymnasts that are there, these young girls have counselors that they go to, and counselors help them to process these things and help them to deal with them. That's what they do. And so my bias is that everybody needs a counselor. I need one, you need one, my wife needs one, this person needs one, everybody needs one. But I believe that a counselor could really be of a benefit to you and help you. That person will also pray for you, you know, listen to you as you talk, help give you some feedback, and so on and so forth, you know, and I really do think that that could be of a benefit to you. It may just mean that your course that you are on might probably take a little longer, because I believe that God gives us people for a reason, right? And the combination of the prayer that you're doing for yourself and the prayer that this person is praying for you and helping you to talk it through and help you to uncover any more trauma, or make sure there's no more trauma there, can be very, very beneficial for you. And the age would not be important at all. I think the age don't really make a difference when it comes to these things, because big adults, big people in their 50s and so on, 40s and all these, have counselors when they go through this trauma. A lot of people in those ages still struggling to get past this kind of a trauma.
So, Pastor, is there something within the church? Is there within the church a system or so where an individual can come and get that type of counseling with somebody who is fully equipped to assist them in that process of change?
I don't know if the church has anyone who specializes in child abuse. My specialty is marital and depression and anxiety and those kind of things. I have dealt with some child abuse cases over the years, that is for sure. But when it comes to that kind of stuff, it's better to have a specialist. But of course, if you want to touch base with me, we can talk about it and see where we go from there. Outside of that, outside of the conference office, outside the conference office, I don't know of anybody else. Anybody else would have to be like, would have to be someone who is non-church, non-Seventh-day Adventist. And if that's the case, I could point you in that direction too.
Okay, the reason why I asked is because years ago I attended a session with someone who was not a Christian, or well, not Christian-minded, and they were giving advice that was really outside, far outside the principles of the Bible that actually the Bible speaks against. So that's why I referred particularly to the church. It does not have to be at the Adventist. It could be a Pentecostal, whatever, because they would know how to maneuver. But you have to be careful when you when people dabbling in things, counseling you along those same lines.
Definitely, and you know, counseling is a specialty, and you have to be very careful who you go to. This is why before you seek out a counselor, you need to have information about him or her, you know, because there are some weird people out there, but there are too some non-Adventist counselors that are very good. But the best person to go to generally is a Christian counselor, not necessarily an Adventist Christian counselor, but a Christian counselor. Because these are things that you need to pray about, you know.
Correct.
So you need somebody there who can really get into some prayer with you.
Thank you so very much, Pastor.
Well, you're most welcome.
Yeah, and please tell your wife I said hi.
Oh,
tell her Damien said hi.
Damien said hi. I don't. He has here renewing mind. I like that. That speaks a lot.
So Pastor, to add to the brother's point, for those persons who may not be strong enough to seek external counsel, but they may be your friend, and they confide in you that they've been abused, what tips can you give? Oh, can you hear me? Yeah. So if a friend comes to you and they're not.
Hold 1 second.
Oh, sure, that's fine.
Yes, please. Sorry about that. I was trying to get back to my computer. I think I discovered what was wrong with my computer.
Oh, okay, good. Right. So to add to the brother's point, so there may be persons who may not be ready to seek external counsel, but may confide in you as a friend that, you know, I've been abused by XYZ. And still for some person who have not been through that trauma, who may not necessarily be fully equipped in terms of guiding the person, what tips can you give to a person who still wants to help their friend, either through the process or at least guide them to some person who can help them?
Listen, I think that oftentimes a friend can be a very, very good support system. You know, as much as psychotherapy, as good as psychotherapy is, you want to mute Dave? Yeah, mute it, please. As good as psychotherapy, I'm hearing myself. I'm sorry. My wife is dabbling. As good as psychotherapy is, friend, a good friend, a confidential friend can be very, very helpful. Let me tell you why. When it comes to counseling, trust is the key. Trust, confidentiality, right? If you have a friend that you can trust and it's confidential, and you can sit down with that person, casual conversation, just talking and sharing and so on, have that person pray for you, yeah, and have that person just simply be there as a shoulder to cry on, and as a person who will be available when you're feeling down and so on. I'm telling you, that could be a very, very powerful thing. I had a really nice book years ago. I don't know what became of it. Maybe I loaned it to someone at my local. Maybe loan it to Limbrook. I don't know. On how to counsel a friend, right? And the book points out a lot of different ways you can. Sister Corsa, was it you I loaned my book to? The book pointed out ways in which you can counsel a friend.
No, sir.
By being supportive, by being a good listening ear. If the person wants to cry with them, you can take the person out for a drive and that kind of thing, you know, things like that. Because as long as a person knows that they have a good listening ear and they can trust this person, it goes a long way. You know what a counselor does? Counselors don't solve people's problems, you know. God does that. But you know what a counselor will do? A counselor will be very empathetic, very sympathetic, very understanding, being there for you, being very trustworthy, a shoulder to cry, but you must be available. You must be available. If you have a person like that, you will get over that. You will get over it because the person is constantly there for you. You don't need nothing else. You don't need anything else. One of the reasons why we need counselors nowadays, especially in the present environment that we live in, is simply because people have become too busy. You remember there was a time when we would got problems and we would go and hang out with the boys and we would sit down and talk and we would have fun and all the rest of it and come home and be good. Nowadays the fellas go on the trees and they smoke or something. But that's not what we do anymore. But a counselor is that a good friend is that person who can really sit down with you and be available for you when you need them. You will get past that, like Renew Mind right there. If he had a good friend in church and so on, somebody pray for him and encourage him, you'll be surprised to know. But you see those things, you see the thing is that you have to get those things out of your system. You can't let them stay inside of your system. It's when we keep them in that it makes us sick. It's when we put it out and you just have somebody there with you who will reflect back what you said and help you to put some little pieces together. You'll be just fine. But that person will have to give time. And we live in a busy world nowadays. Everybody has their own business looking after, and that is part of the problem that we have.
Okay. Well, thank you, Pastor. Thank you very much. So we have a comment and or question from, is it Redmi? And
yes,
then from Nicole.
Redmi is Vincent Greenwich.
Oh, sorry. Sorry. Redmi, okay, go ahead.
Yes, because my system is not working, so I'm using this Redmi. I can't pronounce it myself, but it's good enough.
Hello, Greenwich, how are you?
Yes, I'm well, Pastor. I'm well. I'm very well. We're all well.
Okay.
What my observation is in terms of these statistics you give, in terms of the abuse among, say, teenagers. Let's use teenagers as a general thing. Very often in our society, adults tend to characterize and maybe blame teenagers or blame a certain age group for, say, advancing some areas of society. But from my observation, it seems as though that the majority of those who, the perpetrators, are merely among the adults. Because I'm not sure if your findings, if you have any stats in terms of the percentage of abusers of teenagers among the adults and the teenagers. For you don't, it seems as though that the teenagers don't abuse teenagers. It's the adults who abuse the teenagers. It would be good that if you have some stats or some average or percentage of those teenagers who have been abused by their peers, as opposed to the teenagers who have been abused by adults in the 50s or 60s. But the society cannot try to criticize the young people or the teenagers for certain ills of societies when abuse is one of the common ills of our society, because a sexual abuse is a very dominant part of our society. Yes, people smoke drugs, young people may involve in some behaviors, but sexual abuse is one of the areas that adults are the main perpetrators in our society. Maybe you can, from your maybe your professional side, if you have any stats in terms of the abuse among teenagers as opposed to abuse among the adults and the teenagers.
So there is the stats I remember reading. I didn't pay attention to the statistics too much on that, but though there are adults who abuse teenagers, yes, the reality is that there is teenage to teenage abuse. The thing is that a lot of that abuse is not documented. They mainly document adult to teen, yeah. But what happens is that when a teenager, and I would have hinted to this slightly too in my presentation, when a teenager goes out, two teenagers go out to on a date, the teenage boy that you go out with makes a big difference. Let me tell you why. I did a presentation some time ago on pornography, and one of the things we learned is that when children watch a lot of pornography and they grow up watching pornography, the pornography kind of determines how they behave in a relationship. For example, on the pornography, they notice that the girl is willing to do all these things and even willing to give herself willingly. When a teenager is accustomed to watching that stuff, pornography, when he takes a young lady out on a date, that is what he expects. He expects that the young lady gives herself to him. When she fails to do it, then what happens is that it becomes aggressive sex, well, forced sex, I would say, and which we can easily say rape, because it wasn't consensual. And this is teenage to teenager. So there are teenage to teenage sexual abuse for sex, but generally a lot of it is not documented simply because a lot of them are of the same age. But we document the ones that come from the adults to the teenagers. And a lot of these teenagers too, who you find are being sexually abused, were abused too when they were small. Don't forget that, because they came through, and you notice that from what Myers said, right? It started early and it came through. And a lot of these ladies too, by the way, just for information, a lot of these ladies, what they generally would meet a man who would abuse them. They would generally find themselves in relationships where they would be abused, sexually abused, yeah, because they kind of gravitate towards to that kind of person. And generally we choose partners not on a conscious level, but at an unconscious level. So we gravitate towards that person that has the potential to hurt us. But yes, there is teenage to teenage, and that would call for a good bit of research, and I'd be glad to do that. I think I'm going to look into that, because I think that it is out there, but it is not oftentimes presented. It is there, but it's not oftentimes presented, because I did come across some of it in my research. But I can't give you the stats if that's what you're asking. I can't say is this out of this and that out of that, because I did not mentally record it, nor did I write it down.
Okay, pass. Go ahead, Sister Nicole. Your hand is up.
Yes, please. Thank you. Yes. Good night, everybody.
Good night, Nicole.
Pastor Samuel, how are you? Say hello to Queen Esther for me.
Yeah, she's right there. She heard you.
Thank you.
I enjoyed your presentation this evening. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Blessing. Now, my question or statement would be, what I would be a devil's advocate kind of. What advice would you give to the actual perpetrator who has the itch, who has this this thing going on in their head to fondle with children, or entice them to watch videos that are not age appropriate and stuff like that, because we are dealing kind of with the victims. But how about the actual perpetrators, the ones who may be thinking or have already acted on the child abuse somewhat? What advice would you give to them? In that, if you understand what I'm saying.
I got you covered. I got you covered, Nicole. Let me begin by saying thanks for the question, Nicole. Good to see you. I hear you. Let me say that one of the things we have to keep in mind about perpetrators, they do not do it for the sex. Now, if you think that they're doing it for the sex, you're going to have a problem. They're not necessarily doing it because they have an itch. If you want to add, if they were doing it for the itch, and I want to give them advice, I would want to introduce them to Bird Hill, because up there is up there you can go and pay, nobody bothers you. But I came through Bird Hill one day. I just Brother Vince, I just want you to know I was just passing through Bird Hill. Okay, it was a nighttime. I was just passing through also. and I want you to know that my wife was with me in the car.
Yeah, my wife was with me. I
passed. Bush Hill, sorry, Bush Hill. And my wife reminded me is Bush Hill. Bush Hill is correct. But it runs from Bush Hill and they come right down now, and they run all the way down and come through there by where the old. Well, let me leave that alone. But I would want to introduce them to there. But the point I want to make to you, Nicole, back to you is that perpetrators do not do this for the sex. Okay, that is not the reason they do it. And so we have to understand that. So it is not so much about the perpetrator having an itch that they say, okay, I feel like having sex and I'm going to do it. That is not what it is. What perpetrators have a problem. It is a psychological problem, and they need to address that problem. The reason they do it is so that they can have power and control over victims. That is why they do it. For the issue of just like in case of domestic violence, the reason a man beats a woman is for power and control. It's the same thing. It's the same very thing. We may think in cases that where a man, a father of a child sleeps with his daughter, sexually abuse his daughter, all right? And you look at that and you say, okay, if he wanted sex, why he didn't go to his wife? Ain't about that. What it's about is that I can show you that I am controlling this, and if I want this, I will get it, and you can't stop me. Power and control, because it's right. He could have easily gone and have sex with his wife, or he could have left home and go have it with somebody else. But notice the person he chooses. a person that is much more weaker and vulnerable than he is. And that is what these persons do. Go for those persons who they believe are weak and vulnerable. All right. So you have to keep that in mind. And let me add this to this whole thing is that perpetrators can get help, but generally they don't seek help because as far as they're concerned, nothing is wrong with them. Well, who thinks that anything is wrong with them when they're doing bad things, right? Donald Trump think there's nothing wrong with him. Come on, right? So what I'm saying to you is that these persons really need to get help because they do have a psychological problem, a problem that they need to sit down with a counselor and work through. But they don't do that simply because they think they don't have a problem.
Thank you. So my last statement would be you can categorize them similar to a person that is a narcissist, a psychopath, something like a murderer who thrills watching persons go through traumatic pain. So
Yes.
that's their thrill that they get.
Yes.
From watching. So hence why the reason why they will go with somebody that is vulnerable and weak. Thank you.
That's right. That is correct. And by the way, my wife say hi back to you, Nicole.
Hi, my God.
And she say hi back to you too. Renewed mind.
Received, sir.
So do we have any other comments and or questions?
Someone, a lady is sitting in front of me, next to my wife. She's asking me a question. She's trying to make the question hard for me. She's asking, where does the problem begin? I'm not sure for the perpetrator. Yeah, she's asking where the problem begins. It begins with the abuser. The question is, where does the abuse begin? Sticking to the perpetrator. Here's the thing. Little innocent children who are just trying to grow up in the world, come into the world as innocent as they possibly can, don't really have any problem. As far as they're concerned, life is beautiful. They just want some milk. They just want something to eat. They just want mommy. They just want daddy. So they are not really a problem. The problem is with us as adults. And generally, perpetrators are simply those persons, like I said, who have some kind of a psychological problem and they get joy out of hurting others. Now, one of the things that you will find is that perpetrators don't just abuse just one person. As long as you discover a perpetrator has abused a child, chances are you need to do a little bit of research because they have probably left a trail of victims that said nothing. And if you pay attention to the television and watch some of the news that happens, usually when someone is accused of sexual abuse, it's not only that one person, you know. This is the one person who had the courage to come out and say it. But now what is happening is when that one person had the courage to come out and speak up, you know, we begin to see a whole line of other ladies coming out and speaking up of the abuse that took place at the hands of this one person. So it's generally be a cycle. These persons do it. They've been doing it over and over again, and they've been getting away with it for so long that they think that they can always get away with it, until one day some woman somewhere had the courage to stand up and say, listen, this man abused me this time and this time. And when you check and you do your history on the person, you find that this is something that they have been doing for a long time. And what happens is that this perpetrator might have come through now, might have been impacted. Let's say this man has been impacted by his father. You understand? Because these things run into the generations. Might have been impacted by the father. So the father did it, he did it. All right. And he passes that on from generation to generation. And the cycle keeps going and going all the time. So I'm saying and generally they're not caught because in most cases the father got away or the grandfather got away or the great grandfather got away. But for some reason they're expected to get away too, but they did not get away simply because one woman somewhere had enough courage to say, he did this to me when it was small, or he did this to me at such and such a time. And then the legal system jumps into place and do all they can to bring that person to justice.
Okay, I've not seen any other hands. So Pastor Salmon, I honestly want to thank you and commend you for your expertise in handling this topic. Honestly, in trying to find someone, I wanted someone who actually knew what they were speaking about and was able to equip us as a church to go out and literally battle what I call a demon head on. And I'm sure each and every one of us here on Zoom and on YouTube would have been either more sensitized and even given some tools on how to actually combat this malignancy, in my opinion. So Pastor Selman and to your wife and everybody else, thank you very much. And I hope that going forward, if we do tackle this again, we will have a little more prepared. And if we meet some person who've dealt with this, we can be a shoulder to lean on and that friend that they so desperately need. So Pastor Selman, thank you.
You are most welcome, Yara. I'm very proud of you. You have grown up very big, beautiful young lady. God bless you. And it's always good to speak to the saints at the Milan Quarter Church.
Yes, most definitely.
Over there. God bless you all. Thanks, everybody. Have a good evening. Have a good night. Have a great week. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you. We'll now have our closing hymn, number 12, My Maker and My King. We'll now have our closing prayer. Dear Father who art in heaven, we want to thank you very much for this wonderful, blessed Sabbath day we spent in your presence. Dear God, we've gone through a topic that is very, very sensitive, and we know that many of your children have been marred by this particular sin. And I pray, dear God, as your people, you give us the thought process and the genuineness to help any person who would have been touched by this particular sin, and that we'll be able to prop them up and get into toward healing. So, Father God, we love you and we thank you. In your son's precious name, amen.
We have been called to follow Christ. We are to preach, we are to teach, we are to fight. So where you lead me, I will go. Touch my lips, by your strength I will go. I will go where you lead me, I will go. Where you lead me, who will go for us? I will go. I will go where you lead me, I will go. Where you lead me, here am I. Send me, Lord, I will go. Because my eyes have seen the King, I must tell all the world, worship him. In all the nations, in all the world, where he sends me, yes, I will go. I will go where you lead me, I will go. Where you lead me, who will go for us? I will go. I will go where you lead me, I will go. Where you lead me, here am I. Send me, Lord, I will go. I will go. I will go. Who will go for us? I will go. I will go. I will go. Here am I. Send me, Lord, I will go. I will go. I will go. I will go.
Before we leave, just two final announcements. Tomorrow night, we will not be having our regular church meeting, but instead we'll be having our church prayer meeting. But we'll reassemble as a church on Wednesday night at 7 p.m. for the study on chapter 16 of the last day events. So we won't have any church tomorrow, but instead reconvene on Wednesday night at 7 p.m. So everyone, have a wonderful week.